Okay, so it's been a while since I talked about the Kentucky bourbon industry. And it seems some of the distillers are betting on things getting better, and even putting like billions of dollars into their distilleries and upgrades. But in this article, I found that none of them actually blame the real problem. And we, the rest of the world, we know what the problem is. But in this video, I'm going to show you some of the points in the article that show how delusional these distilleries are, and the reason why things are not going to improve. Because I have 3 other clips I'm going to show as well that show BC, Manitoba, and the federal government, they're not budging on their stance when it comes to the US alcohol. And Manitoba's Premier Wab Kinew, I think his answer is freaking awesome. So you're going to want to stick around for that one. And let's get started first on the article. And it's titled, Kentucky Bourbon in Crisis as Distillers Cut Production, but Bet Billions on the Future. I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but I don't mind watching the ship sink. Before I start, I want to thank Jace from our Discord server for bringing this article to my attention. And fair warning everyone, there's no co-host here today. The co-host, the Torty, and my wife, they've gone out for the afternoon, so it's just me here. So unfortunately, if you're waiting for the cat, you'll have to wait for the next video. But I'll post up some photos of the co-host at the end of the video. Alright, so I'm going to start reading it out. I'm only picking certain parts of it because it's a very long article. So if you want to read the whole thing, I'll leave it in the description below. Kentucky's bourbon industry finds itself in a paradoxical state, with distillers like Heaven Hill's brand simultaneously scaling back production due to lagging demand while investing heavily in expansion. Now, I'm not a business owner, but that seems a little bit backwards to me. I don't know. Despite a tumultuous market in 2025, the company, famed for brands such as Evan Williams and Elijah Craig, I've never heard of them, completed a new $200 million distillery, adding 155,000 barrels of capacity to the heart of the bourbon country. This reflects an industry whiplash, grappling both struggles and growth. While local cooperages face backlogs of unused barrels, distillers cut output and some lay off staff. Tourists continue to flock the plant for tours. Okay, tourists is not where your money's coming from, it's from exporting, which to your largest market right now is not putting any on the shelves. Now here's where you're going to start to facepalm quite a bit. The cause of the bourbon troubles is hotly debated by this Republican stronghold, Reuters found through more than 20 interviews. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, a Democrat and potential 2028 presidential candidate, believes tariffs are a key headwind, making supplies more expensive and complicating access to crucial new international markets. Well, no shit. I'm glad there's at least one person in Kentucky that understands. However, distillers often downplay the political factors, attributing issues to cyclical elements like inflation and inherent difficulty of forecasting demands in years in advance for aging spirits. Max Shapira, Heaven Hill executive chairman, quipped that the company has gotten demand right over 90 years 0 times, adding that the current tariffs really aren't very impactful. So in other words, what he's saying is that it's not the orange guy's fault, probably the guy that he voted for. It's the fact that they didn't estimate right, or that they didn't forecast right either. You know, reading this kind of bullshit makes me really want to boycott even more. Because what they're doing is they're downplaying everything right now. They're downplaying the fact that we've taken off the liquor off of our shelves, downplaying the tariffs of actually being a factor for all of this bullshit we're going through, and just saying it's a forecasting issue. I don't know, I kind of play this to like US exceptionalism a little bit. Let me know if you agree with me on this and put your comments below. And if you do agree, and you're not subscribed yet, and you think this is bullshit, hit that subscribe button so you're notified of my future videos. Moving on, a Heaven Hill spokesperson confirmed lower bourbon output this year to pace production after a decade of booming growth. As midterm elections approach in November, the differing narratives highlight the complexity of America's economic realities and the enduring influence of the orange idiot in rural South. I think that's the author's polite way of saying that the people in the rural South of Kentucky are a bunch of idiots. I don't know, that's how I'm reading it. Greg Hughes, CEO of Jim Beam, owner of Suntory Global Spirits, viewed the situation as temporary, blaming inflation and falling demand in developed countries, rather than tariffs for Jim Beam's production cuts. He stated the industry will get through this and be absolutely fine, anticipating growth in emerging markets like Latin America. So instead of blaming the tariffs and the orange guy, this time this guy is blaming the inflation as well as falling demand in developed countries. You see the pattern that I'm trying to show you guys? I mean, I don't think it takes a genius to kind of figure this one out. In Bardstown, where bourbon underpins the local economy, business owners like Gene Nolan of Cozy Cottage acknowledge it's a vital role, but largely do not blame the orange guy for broader struggles. Jesus Christ. Susanna Buscemi, co-owner of Volstead Bourbon Lounge, tries to keep politics out, stating, "In here, we're all having a good time and drinking, and surprisingly suggests that tariffs are a good thing for consumers, despite increasing costs." Jesus, what the fuck is wrong with Kentucky? I don't know about you guys, but it infuriates me reading this. And like I said, my boycott on any US bourbon or liquor just grows reading this. Overall, Kentucky's distillers are planning a $1.45 billion in new expansions, betting on a return to demand as economic pressures ease and overseas markets like India develop. Yet, Clark warned that tariffs uncertainty could have a cooling effect, potentially causing distillers to postpone some of their planned investments. Now, I don't think I have many viewers from India. I mean, my analytics show India as a very small portion. But my question is, do you think the United States thinks that they can just jump to country? Because it seems like they know Canada is not taking their liquor, and they're just going like, okay, let's go to India, or let's go to Latin America, or let's sell elsewhere. They'll take it. What they don't realize is the entire freaking world, even the penguins, are all pissed off at the United States. Tourism remains a robust area, with 2.7 million visits to Kentucky's Bourbon Trail last year, roughly flat with 2024. This stability is crucial for smaller brands relying on site-to-site sales. Bill Peterson, a Chicago-based designer, exemplifies the enduring appeal, stating, "I'm going to stay a diehard bourbon guy, after spending over $1,000 on whiskey bottles in a single day." Well, good for you, Bill, but you're not where the money comes from. You're going to have to spend millions if you want to catch up to what Canada used to spend. Now, this article has a lot more. Like I said, it's in the description if you want to read it. But what I wanted to show you is how oblivious the Kentucky bourbon industry is, and what they're actually blaming for the downturn. I mean, I thought this guy was an idiot, but it turns out the whole industry is just like him. They won't blame the person that's causing all of this, they won't blame the tariffs, and they'll just put their own meaning on why they think the downturn is happening. Like they didn't forecast it properly. It's the exact same thing that's happening when the tourism industry. They're saying it's because of the exchange rate and the weather and whatever bullshit else. But I want to move on to the next report, which is Canada, their main market. And this should give everybody reassurance that the stance on U.S. liquor is not going to change.
David Aiken is with me from Ottawa. David.
Well, Donna, when U.S. President Donald Trump first slapped Canada with tariffs on Canadian forestry, steel, and autos, many premiers slapped back by instructing provincially owned liquor stores to drop U.S. booze. Well, the White House this week says those booze bans are one of America's chief trade irritants with Canada. Prime Minister Mark Carney today said Canada has its own complaints.
Look, you know what's an irritant? 50% tariff on steel, 50% tariff on aluminum, 25% tariff on automobiles, all the tariffs on forest products. Those are more than irritants. Those are violations of our trade deal.
And yet, the United States won't actually acknowledge any of this. Instead, they focus on us taking the liquor off the shelves. They don't focus on the cause, they focus on the reaction. I mean, take a look at what Nutlick said.
It is outrageous that Canada will not put U.S. spirits on the shelf. It is insulting.
It is.
And disrespectful to America that they won't
Absolutely.
even put...
And my husband has an interest in a company that has American spirits.
Yeah, I don't give a shit about your husband's interest. But going back to that Nutlick guy, he says it's insulting that we took the liquor off the shelves. Well, why did we take the liquor off the shelves? It's because of all these stupid tariffs. We cannot be gaslit into thinking that we're the problem when we didn't start this.
Premier, thanks so much for joining us.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford took to a U.S. cable news show the day after U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said it was, quote, outrageous and disrespectful that U.S. spirits were not being sold in most of Canada.
We never started this tariff war, and I don't believe the American people did.
Disagree with you, Doug. 77 million Americans did vote for this, and they allowed this to happen. So start putting the blame on some of the U.S. citizens. They're not innocent.
It was Secretary Lutnick, followed by President Trump as well, that attacked our joint economies.
And Carney said he was not about to tell Ford what to do.
Surprise, surprise, the Premier of Ontario is influential with the LCBO. Okay. But he's the client. He's also the duly elected Premier of Ontario. He's got a majority. And he's taking a view, which, you know, by most indications is supported by the vast majority of the population.
Carney says the booze ban, along with U.S. tariffs on Canadian steel and so on, are appropriately dealt with as part of the broader review of the Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade agreement. Canada wants a strengthened three-way agreement and appears to be in no rush to negotiate one-off deals, be it about U.S. whiskey or Canadian aluminum. Donna.
Okay, David.
So let's not forget that the US government, before we even get to the CUSMA negotiations, wanted us to put the liquor back on the shelves, which is complete bullshit if you ask me. Now, we heard from the federal government as well as the Premier of Ontario. Now let's hear what my home province of BC has to say about this.
The Americans may be pushing Kentucky bourbon and California Cabernet, but don't expect U.S. liquor back on BC shelves anytime soon.
The reality is the British Columbians who are pissed off about our industry being attacked, our families losing jobs, for absolutely no reason to prefer Russian and European lumber to Canadian lumber. It's ridiculous, and the liquor won't go back on the shelf until that's addressed.
Embargoes on U.S. alcohol in several provinces, including BC and Ontario, have triggered the Trump administration, which has called them an irritant in negotiations on CUSMA, the trade deal between Canada, U.S., and Mexico, scheduled to be renewed July 1st.
Now, when it comes to CUSMA, I don't think it's going to happen, to be honest. And if it does, like I said in my previous videos, do you trust that it will be honored? Because I don't. I don't trust a single thing out of this U.S. administration. But hearing the BC Premier's stance on this alcohol situation, I'm glad he's not moving on this or budging. And it also tells me all of those Kentucky bourbon distillers that I read out earlier, they can keep dreaming that things are going to come back to normal. Now, I'm going to stop the report here because the rest of it kind of repeats what Prime Minister Mark Carney said earlier in the last report. But what I want to do is I want to move on to a report from CTV, and they interviewed the Premier of Manitoba. And Wab Kinew's answers to this CTV reporter, which he's a complete douchebag if you ask me. Wab Kinew's answers are awesome, and I want to show it to everybody.
This week has been a lot of talk on what it could take to get CUSMA negotiations restarted. Now, you've been for that ban on American spirits and alcohol. Is there a world in which you think it might be worth considering that stance if talks can advance?
You know, I think we've been very clear that what we want to see happen is to get all these tariffs lifted and the threat of tariffs to stop. So if Donald Trump quits it with the tariffs, probably one of the worst economic policies he's advanced, which is quite a list to be on the top of, I will say, then yeah, we'd look at bringing the American booze back. But for now, this is an effective card that we have at the negotiating table. And the fact that you have Trump's acolytes throwing their tantrums as they do, it tells you that it's working. So why would we stop something that's clearly working and having an effect and driving some people that don't share our values a little wild?
100% agree with Wab Kinew on this one. Let's not forget all the tariffs that they put on Canada. There's like 4 or 5 of them that the Prime Minister read out earlier. Now I want you to listen to the CTV reporter's next few questions. They're a bit ridiculous if you ask me.
So I just want to be clear, when you say if they remove the tariffs, that is something that you would consider removing the ban on American alcohol. Which tariffs?
All of them. 100% of the tariffs. No tariffs, no threat of tariffs. Then you can have the booze back.
And in your mind, it's a 1-for-1. It's not a, and I only say this because, again, I think, you know, Canadians understand it, and certainly, you know, I understand why provinces like yourself have moved in this way, and we understand the economic threat that is coming from the United States. But what you're proposing here is them removing tariffs on steel, aluminum, lumber, and autos in exchange for that one concession on American alcohol. Is that what I'm understanding?
100%. Yeah, that's right.
I mean, what's not to understand about this? The United States put all these different tariffs on us and the rest of the world, to be quite frank. And I agree with Wab Kinew on this. I don't know what the CTV guy is trying to get out of Wab Kinew, but Wab Kinew's answers is exactly what I would say.
So I guess my follow-up here is the fact that so much of our investment into this country from other allies really does sort of hinge on access through CUSMA. So do you think it does make sense for us to prevent getting a trade deal just because we think it makes sense to continue this ban? It almost seems like, you know, we know that it works and we see that it is effective because it is getting their attention. But do you think that it makes enough sense that it could be hindering our ability to get back to the table here?
I don't know. Maybe we should up the ante. Maybe we should say that they need to release the Epstein files, and then we'll remove the booze ban. Donald Trump obviously does not like talking about the Epstein files because he's mentioned in there so often, and he does very erratic things to try and change the channel whenever the domestic pressure is growing on it. So maybe we should put that on the table and then say that that's when the booze will come back, when they release the rest of the Epstein files. So we're in a negotiation. There's a lot of bluster, a lot of heat, a lot of tough talk coming from the American side. We have a card that works with these booze bans. I don't think we should give it up. We should play our cards right.
100% agree. Because you know what's going to happen is if we put the liquor back on the shelves, they're just going to throw something else at us. There's no playing in good faith with the United States anymore. And quite frankly, how these US distilleries are treating the current situation, basically blaming their forecasting and stuff like that, I say fuck them. Let your barrels start to stockpile. I don't care. And this CTV reporter basically saying that we need to put the liquor back on the shelves in order to, restart the CUSMA negotiations. That's basically giving in to the bully. And fuck the bullies.
Okay, with respect, I don't think we have control over that other thing that you said to include and up the ante, but I'm going to leave that there for...
Why not? And why are we afraid to talk about it? It's this crazy thing that everyone knows the Americans are afraid of. Their president is afraid of. So let's just say what it is. The president is mentioned in the Epstein files a huge amount of times. His government continues to conceal them. And so why don't we just say that we're going to drive a hard bargain until they release the rest of the files? If they want to talk tough about 51st state, they want to have their secretaries go into congressional hearings and throw various tantrums, then we should just hit them where it hurts, hit them where they don't want to respond.
Wab Kinew, I would love to have a beer with you. Because you said something that a lot of people won't, which is basically bringing up the Epstein files. I think you can tell that Wab Kinew was getting a little annoyed at this reporter. But I'm glad he said what he did, because it shows that Canada is not going to bend over, and that we're firm on the stance when it comes to the US liquor. Now to close off this video, I would like to thank Peter for sending over this photo of my home in Vancouver, British Columbia. And this photo is taken at Stanley Park overlooking West Van. Peter said he did about 21,000 steps around the seawall, which tells me he probably did a little bit more than just Stanley Park. My guess is like Cole Harbor and into False Creek. But thank you, Peter, for sending me a photo from home. And the weather looks great back home. And as promised, here's a photo of the coast I took a few days ago. And I'm sorry you don't get the live experience or the cat meows. If you found any value in anything I said today, or you want to hear more from a Canadian and international perspective without the US media bias, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button below. That way you'll be notified of my future videos. And if you want to see more of my videos, check out the ones that are going to show up on your screen shortly. Thanks everyone. I'll catch you in the next one.